Hello everyone, welcome to Make of a Monday Viz Review for week 15, and with me again is Luke. Hi Luke.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to be here.
I believe the dog favourites were a crowd favourite too. I think people enjoyed seeing that.
Yeah, I think there's been some good feedback on it, so we can do it again this week. I haven't posted the swag yet. I'll try and get to the post office tomorrow.
Yeah.
One's going to Canada, one's going to the Netherlands. So
I think post offices around the world are probably the least efficient places I know. It's
yeah. We've got a big deadline this week for our 24th cohort of the data school. So I'm kind of neck deep in reviewing visits for that at the moment. So I'll try and get my lunch break tomorrow to the post office.
Oh, that'll be great. And we'll see what Maggie and Mabel, what they like this week, and I need to make sure I do that on time. So yeah. Okay, so this week I saw that you posted your viz. I haven't even looked at the data, let alone downloaded the data set. I've been a bit swamped. But let's maybe start on data.world for a moment. The data is about fouls called by NBA referees, and the original viz is basically like a dot plot with one row for, I think, each of the different types of fouls, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And then you kind of see where the different referees are, which is pretty cool. And I think Andy ended up recreating the original because he liked it.
Yeah, I think the original is a good example of, I don't know, I think a lot of the time with Makeover Monday, the viz that you're making over is, let's say, less than optimal. But in this case, I think actually it's a good example of one that's, a great chart choice for this data set. And I mean, certainly I used a similar sort of chart choice for what I did. And I had a quick look on Twitter, over the last few days, and there seems to be quite a lot of people doing similar ideas with that. So I think that's quite a good endorsement of the original viz that loads of people have tried to use this, similar chart type.
Absolutely, yeah. And I haven't even thought about what I want to do, but this one I actually understand fairly quickly, to see, okay, this is kind of the null point or the average, more or less, and it's quite simple, so I like that. I just can't see from this picture how you would select a different referee, or maybe you wouldn't. Maybe this is just about Aaron Smith, but there would be an interactive way, or like a filter option where you can actually select which referee you want to look at.
Yeah. So certainly with my viz this week, I find I use Tableau less than I used to when I was consulting. So and when I teach Tableau at universities, generally it's teaching to beginners. So I find that sometimes I forget things these days, because I'm getting older as well. So I wanted to practice parameter actions and remember how they work. So that was my goal. I think sometimes with Makeover Monday, it's a good idea to not only obviously think about your viz, but if there's techniques you want to practice, it's, certain data sets lend themselves better to different functionalities. So
definitely. And I find that there are functionalities that I have never used because I never needed them. But yeah, I'm using Tableau a lot more now, funnily enough. So maybe I'll come across some of those use cases as well. I actually wanted to point out one thing before we move on to the Twitter collection. For those who are not aware, maybe, there is a discussion tab on data.world. Don't use it. I mean, you can, but we never look at this. Like, this is the only time probably this year that I've clicked on it. Maybe for a couple of demos I've said don't use it, but it's literally a waste of your time unless you need somewhere to post a static picture. Most people seem to post, the Tableau link, which is then interactive. We never use it. We haven't used it in over 2 years. We don't intend to use it because there is no threading option, and we have asked for this and it's not available, so we're not using it. And I just want people to know there's no requirement. No favorites will be chosen from data.world. It basically doesn't exist for us, this discussion forum. But we can't switch it off, so there we go. Okay, so we're going to start from the bottom, go to the top. I am pretty sure that we won't have that many people watching live just because of the time change, but people will be watching this on demand, I hope. And we're going to start with Kevin Wee, and let's check his out. I know that he's posted a few updates. I'm hoping the link will just reflect that, and the updates are just, changes in the image that he's posted. So let's see what he's created. And maybe I'll let you start with your feedback, because you've at least worked with the data and had a bit of a think about it.
Yeah, so I'm just having a look on Tableau Public at the moment. So I really like the styling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Been a lot of work gone into that. So we've got these separate histograms, I guess, with a sort of tiled background. Pretty clear on everything here. One thing which I think is always good to do, and I haven't done this on mine, by the way, I don't have time, but it is to maybe try and have some definitions of what these things mean. So I'm not an NBA fan. Not that I don't like basketball, I just don't know anything about it particularly. So I think it's good to try and have a definition of some of the terminologies, if possible.
Yeah, agreed. And it could be almost like we saw last week with some of the definitions, like a few words just below each title, or somewhere. Yeah,
I love the little sort of foul per game. So it's great that he's normalized the data as well. So there's, from memory, there's quite a wide range of games officiated in. So it's a good idea to normalize that data, and he's done that with the fouls per game calculation, and that's that little kind of triangle with a timeline or with a line underneath the histogram. So it's quite a nice visual indicator of where a particular referee sits along that. So yeah, I really like it. I think it looks nice.
I think it's really good, and the only thing I would really change is select the referee is tiny. Like, all I look at is the charts on the right. I don't really see that there is something I'm supposed to do. And I wonder if you could style the selectors differently. And I recommend looking at Lindsay Poulter's blog or Tableau Public profile on, like making the button rather than these rectangular. I mean, it's not your fault, but they remind me very much of like a Windows user interface from 1995. They haven't really evolved much, these menu buttons, but the font is so small, at least for me, that I don't really pay attention to it, because also the white on gray is there's not a strong contrast. So I wonder if there's a way to make the select the season, select the referee more obvious, because to me that gets a bit lost on the left.
Yeah, I guess this is a really good exploratory tool.
Mm-hmm.
I think where dashboards like this fall down slightly is if you wanted to compare a certain referee from one year to the next, or compare two different ones, you have to, you get change blindness basically. So you have to remember what's on the screen at the moment. So I'm filtered for Justin Van Dyne for 1920. If I want to compare how he did in 1920 to 1819, you have to remember the values in your head and then compare them to when you change the filter to the next year, all the graphs change. So you have to try and keep a mental picture of how it was before to how it is afterwards. Which is fine. It depends on how you're intending for it to be used. But sometimes with exploratory visits, if you want to do more kind of comparative analysis yourself, it can get difficult. Just because you have to remember the values when you change a filter.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. We'll move on to the next one. Yeah, definitely. I think it's really cool design, really neat. Next is from Yvonne. And we have Aditya on the chat. Hello, Aditya. He participated last week as well. And I incorrectly called him a she. And I think it's because I have met women called Aditya. I hadn't met a man called Aditya, so I just kind of jumped to that conclusion, but my apologies. Now, let's look at Yvonne's viz. So Yvonne has also participated before, because I remember her name. Top 5 fouls called by NBA referees. Okay, so this focuses on the foul type rather than the referees themselves, isn't it?
Yeah. And yeah, it's nice, simple viz. She's got the labels on there for context. She might have been able to do a bit more with the tooltips, I think. But essentially, it's a different take on the data. And I think I said last week, I'm a fan of when you get a data set that's so big or so rich, particularly like this week's. It's a good idea to take an angle on it if you can. Explore a certain referee, or in this case, narrowing down the data to the top 5 fouls, and then it looks like you can filter by referee as well, which is cool.
So I like the simplicity of it. What I would suggest is, to me, 96,000 shooting fouls means literally nothing. I think it would be nice to see like how many is that per game, per season, per team, whatever it is. Like, it has no reference point to me. And I also, so when I look at the seasons, okay, so there are 4 years, but I don't know how many games are in a season. When Andy talks to me about baseball, I mean, it sounds like there's about 400 games in 200 days. Not quite, but you know what I mean. Like, there's a lot of games in baseball. I don't know how it is in basketball because, like you, I don't really follow it. The sport amazes me in that you have really tall guys and they move so fast and so far, and I'm always like, how do they all fit on this court? Like, it seems like such a small place for them to all play. But that is completely beside the point here. I just don't really have a reference point. I don't know if 96,000, like, is that big? Is that is it bad? How does it maybe compare to other, like the European League, for example? So while the numbers are not wrong, to me they just don't really mean anything. But I do like the simplicity. I would probably, in terms of design, one thing I thought is, why not make it a bar chart and maybe have like the bottom right corner of the viz be like part of, having the basketball image in the background, but it's kind of just the corner of it. So it shows the topic, but because the basketball icons, they're a bit gimmicky in that they don't really give you so much appreciation of how big the number is, I guess.
Yeah, you can see she's actually used the dual axis bar chart. If you click on Tableau Public, you can see that she's whited out the bars behind. I agree. I mean, I think it could do with a bit more context, definitely.
But it's not wrong. Which
terminology and also the values. As you say, how do they compare to season on season, or is a value, is 96,000 a lot or not? Somewhere where you can actually gauge how you're doing, and it may be that she set herself a time limit for this as well. So which is equally a good way of doing it. Not everyone has time to spend hours on it every week. So I agree. More context. But in principle, I like the simplicity of it.
Okay, great. And we'll move on to Ashley Zhang and her viz. I've tried to pick, a few different ones this week, so we'll see. Now, she has the selector for the referee, so you can pick the different ones. I think it's good, but as someone who literally knows none of them, to me, this is like the lottery. I'll just randomly pick something, but I don't know anything about the person. So I wonder if there's room for a bit of a story. I mean, that way you probably have to focus on one referee or maybe a couple of them. But or it could even be something like, like, why is Michael Smith selected, for example? Is there something special about him? That would be interesting for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think the chart choices are good. I like the highlighting of the referee. You can see very clearly where the selected referee lies, amongst all of the others, which is good. I agree. I think this is another indication that the original chart type was the correct one for this data, almost, or was the most applicable one. It doesn't do a huge amount of difference to it displays the data in the same way, but with a slightly different angle. It's doing it by season here, isn't it? I can't remember whether the original one did it by season or not, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And a small formatting suggestion is that you don't need the decimal points on the y-axis. I think it's fine to have them in your chart. I don't mind the detail of that, but on the left, on your y-axis, you don't really need them.
Yeah, you could say that you don't really need an axis at all when you're showing the values. You've got the reference line and also the label for the selected referee as well. So that gives you enough context almost that you don't necessarily need the axis at all.
Yeah. Okay.
But you could take it a bit further and label the minimum and maximum values on each distribution as well. That might be another way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm wondering, is there a trend that so if I look at Fenice, I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. So in 2017-18, it's the third dot from the bottom. In 2016, it's the bottom dot. Like, does he maybe tend to call fewer fouls? Like, he seems to be in the bottom section for most of them. Yeah, for all of the seasons, he seems to be in the bottom section. So I also don't know if this is average across all of the foul types, which I don't know if that's a valid thing to do, because I guess some fouls are more common than others. So I don't know if it's a good idea to average across them.
Well, there was a total fouls measure in the data. So I'm assuming
probably use
that. But I think also it might have been useful in the tooltip to have the number of games officiated in as well.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you an idea, because that Finisi Ransom maybe just didn't do many games. I don't know.
That's a good point.
Or even limiting the data to people who have refereed in a certain amount of games minimum.
Yeah.
I changed mine to include only those who had officiated in the regular season and the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So the playoffs, as I understand it, is like the finals of the NBA. So not all of the referees who referee in the regular season get to referee in the playoffs. They only select some of them. So, if you're comparing some who only refereed in the regular season as opposed to the regular and the playoffs, then it could skew the analysis a little bit. But
okay.
So good idea to consider what the data is showing, and whether you can limit it, or whether it makes sense to limit it. If does it make sense to compare someone who's refereed 100 games as opposed to someone who's refereed 3 games? Probably not.
Exactly. Yeah. And especially if they know, I don't know how the system works, but if they maybe know up front they're not going to referee that many games, does that change their approach a bit? Versus those who referee a lot of games and who are like, well, I just wonder. I don't know. I've never refereed a game, so I couldn't tell you what goes on in their mind. Now, the next quiz is by Raoul, and there's one thing I want to say about box and whisker plots, and I think never use them unless you actually explain them, or at least annotate them in some way, because it's just a visualization that no one, or most people, don't truly understand what it shows them. At least I would say lay people, so the broader audience on Twitter where you're posting it.
Yeah, and if you hover over the tooltip of the box and whisker, you have upper whisker, upper hinge, median, lower hinge, and lower whisker. I always think, as a rule, it's good to assume that your viewer has got zero knowledge of what they're looking at.
Yeah.
And if you can, my mum has no idea about basketball. She's probably got less idea of basketball than me. But if I can show her something that she kind of understands, then you've done a good job then.
Mm-hmm.
So I think more context, particularly, I agree with you around box and whiskers. I think they're useful charts, but you have to really be clear about what it is that you're showing.
And I think the second chart, the one with the 3 rows, is the perfect example. So the title is, of all the fouls, the top 3 most repeated in each game are shooting, personal, and loose ball. do you need a box and whisker plot to show me that, or just a bar chart? Plus, how does the box and whisker plot show you that? Because the spread of the data with the maximums and just the number of dots that are in there. Each dot is the referee. Like, that's what shows us your conclusion. It's not like the box and whisker plot, the upper whisker, the upper quarter, none of that is relevant for the title. So if you want to use that viz, use it to actually tell people more, or don't use it, because otherwise it just gets confusing. I've only ever seen them used properly in scientific journals. I've never seen them used in business in a way that people understand things more.
Yeah, I think they can be useful. I remember when I was doing a consulting engagement with the university over here in the UK, and they wanted league table rankings to be shown in a box and whisker, which was quite an effective use of it, I thought. But I think here the titles don't really match up with the charts.
Yeah.
So the titles are more macro level than the charts. The charts are much more micro level. You've got a lot more detail in there at individual, but there's no element really of, or there's no emphasis on individual referees. You're looking at the top 3 total, most popular fouls and the average number of fouls at the top given in the game by a referee. And you almost need to change the titles or change the charts, I think, to match them up.
Yeah, and this is, so I'm making an assumption here that the box and whisker plot came out of Show Me, and if not, totally fine. But what I want to also encourage people to think about is, if you've used Tableau for a few times, a few months, like, stop using Show Me and try to build the charts from scratch. You will have so much more fun. You will feel so much more in control, and it makes you have to understand how the chart actually works and what it does and what it shows, because you can't just basically use that wizard of Show Me. So I think if you don't use Show Me, you will use a lot less or a lot fewer box and whisker plots, pie charts, tree maps, and that kind of stuff, because it just won't be the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I also remember when I was teaching official Tableau training courses to clients that the box and whisker plot was the only one that you used Show Me for. I don't know if that's changed. I haven't taught one for a while, but I think they're quite kind of time intensive charts to build manually. It's a good exercise to do it, definitely, to to work out how to do all the bands and the reference lines and stuff. But certainly using Show Me is the most efficient way of doing it time-wise. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to Danielle. And I do hope that everyone who tags this review does actually listen to the feedback and do something with it, because that's our hope. Okay, I'll zoom in a little bit here. I see a very small title. I don't need your name and job title under the heading, so that can go somewhere in the corner. NBA fouls by referees distribution.
So use of colour here is an issue for me.
Yeah.
I think we're colouring the squares by the same value as the size. And we've got a diverging colour scheme here, so where the ends of the spectrum are different colours. Normally you'd be best to use these where the values cross 0, or if there's a definitive threshold where the colours will change. I think what he's used is a stepped diverging colour scheme, which kind of indicates, I don't know, it almost makes me think that each of these different colours represents a different category of something as opposed to a value.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with those steps. So it looks like Daniel has included steps rather than a full gradient. And that, I think, makes it look even more categorical, right?
Yeah. I'd also say that probably the tree map isn't the best chart choice to use in this case. I think they can be useful if you have less segments in them, but you could just use a bar chart for this, and I think it would be clearer.
Yeah.
Also, the orientation of the bottom lollipop chart as well.
Yeah.
It's really hard to see what those, and they're truncated anyway, the headers, so it'd be good to flip that, have it vertical. And I'm also not a fan of the way Tableau automatically puts in grid lines and things like that. I always end up basically taking them off.
I take them off everything.
Is basically just remove all the default formatting that Tableau adds in, because I find it adds a lot of noise to the dashboards as well, and a lot of the time it doesn't really help. So
yeah, one thing I asked for is to have an ability to change the default formatting forever. You know, if I'm the admin, like I want to go into Tableau Desktop and say, I never want grid lines in anything until I tell you I want grid lines, and then for that to apply to any file I open. But that doesn't exist. So, yeah.
That'll be so good. I think I started using Tableau properly in 2012, and the amount of time I must have spent since then, you know, getting rid of formatting in dashboards.
Yeah, formatting takes probably 70% of the time for me is formatting.
Yeah, I mean, my stock way of doing it is I'll create one chart, set the formatting as I want for that chart, and then I'll just duplicate it and swap in the fields, swap out the fields. And that saves so much time. You know, if you create each individual chart from scratch.
Yeah, I do the
same.
You
just end up having to take a formatting of everything. So.
You just need to make sure that your marks type is set to whatever the specific one is and not automatic, because if you then bring in something that creates a new chart, the formatting is gone again. So, yeah. Now, I did want to make a couple of additional points. So you've already said about the tree map. I think the tree map here is meaningless, but also like the titles, it's like a very functional description of what's there, but it doesn't tell us anything about the data. It doesn't tell us anything about the topic, or, you know, what do you want me to take away from it? If you want me to take away that Scott Foster has given the most fouls across, I'm guessing, all seasons, then tell me that. You know, you could say, you know, if you stick with a tree map, for example, or if you change it to a bar chart, you could say, well, you know, the top 5 referees have given this and this many fouls. The bottom 5, like, just tell us something to guide our own understanding of this. Distribution of fouls on reason basis for all. What does that even mean? Like, literally doesn't tell me anything. And because the shooting fouls far outnumber everything else, shooting and personal, at the bottom you just see like circles on the 0 line, but they're actually not 0. Some of them are, you know, fairly high. So when you see the viz yourself, you should ask yourself, oh, does that actually show the data in a really easy way or not? And then I don't know what. So on the right side, distribution of fouls on season basis. What's season basis? Okay, well,
split up season, I think, but I think I agree with you on the titles. I say to applicants to the data school, you know, the titles are a real great opportunity for you to kind of segment your viz and divide it into really clear sections, but also that they're a good way to, you know, people ignore them. They're a bit like tooltips. I think people kind of gloss over them a little bit, and a technique is to ask questions in the titles, I find, because, you know, then you're almost challenging the person viewing your viz to actually jump into it and answer the question, or have a look and explore the data based on whatever question you ask in the title.
Yeah. And maybe thinking about it, like think about an orchestra, right? You have the, like, what do you call the person with the stick? The director guy? Person? The woman?
Conductor.
The what?
Conductor.
Yeah, the conductor, that's the one. So the conductor is not going to just walk in and say, today we are going to play Mozart and Bach and blah and blah and blah. They're just going to come and start with a bang, right? They're going to start with a really strong opening piece to make everyone be like, holy shit, this is going to be so good for the next 2 hours. So think of it, or think of a book title. You know, if the book title was, this is a book about birds. So, but if you make it, you know, The Secret Life of Birds, people are going to be curious. So think of it as like, this is your first opportunity to get the audience to pay attention. Don't tell them what they already know or expect, or something that's just really kind of listing off things. Like, make it part of the story. And the last thing I want to say is the bottom right bar chart. While again, the numbers are fine, they're not incorrect, but it makes me think, oh my God, there's something going on with orange versus blue. And then I look at the top, okay, well, regular season has so many more games compared to the playoffs that looking at the total number is not going to be useful because you're just not going to have that many opportunities to foul. But if you look at fouls per game, this would be more easy to compare because you're normalizing it. Well, fouls per game, yeah, that should be a good way to maybe compare. Do people foul more in the regular season or in the playoffs? And that way you can make this chart more meaningful.
Yeah. I get the feeling from this one that it's almost more like an academic piece of work, and I'd like to see a little bit more kind of accessibility to people, and try and sell what you've created a little bit more to whoever's using it, and coupled with that is sort of, I think, better chart choices and clearer orientation, and maybe get rid of some of the formatting, that sort of stuff. And yeah, the color for me, because the human eye, we associate things that are colored the same. We think that they're related somehow. So I look at this bottom right bar chart with the orange, being dominant, and I look straight up, and then there's orange squares on the tree map, and I think, those squares related to the regular season. Yeah. Likewise, there are some bluish squares as well as we get down to the smaller segments of the tree map as well. So
yeah. Okay. I think there's quite a few things that Daniel can have a think about and address as he moves through this. So then we have Aditya. Finally, we're getting to his viz, and he's on the chat. There hasn't been a lot of chatting because a lot of people just aren't around, a lot of the regulars, but hopefully those who are getting some good value out of this. Okay, foul count by NBA referees. And my first question is, why is everything pink?
That was mine as well.
Because pink and orange to me, because orange, you've got the basketball and then we've got those arrows. Orange and pink don't really gel for me. I also don't see, if it was red or blue, I'd understand because it's in the NBA logo, but I don't understand the pink. But let's see. So we've got another box and whisker plot. Do you know what the arrow is? Oh, it's
got some vision tooltips as well.
Yeah. Oh, and the arrow is the chosen referee. And there's more colors. Now there's red and there's turquoise and black.
Yeah, I think Andy Kriegel once said in a work related discussion, I think he tries to create things, or he starts creating vizzes with no color at all, and then you add it in as you go, as required. I think that's a really good way to think about the use of color in when you're creating a dashboard, is almost try and create it in a neutral color, or just black and white or something like that. And if you feel color will add something to your analysis and to your dashboard, then to add it in. Whereas I see the pink here, and you'd almost understand it a little bit more if it was a shade of color that had been used in the NBA logo or something like that. But I don't know where the pink is relevant, really. And I think that's a big point to consider with color. If you're going to use it, make it mean something, or if you're using it from an aesthetic perspective, you use a color that is associated with the subject that you're analyzing.
Yeah, definitely. And I totally agree with removing, if all the pink was gray or black, would it be the same level of understanding? Absolutely. I understand the use of that orange arrow. I don't know if I would make it an arrow because that kind of suggests the direction to me. And what color you choose, that's up to you. But I understand highlighting the referee that's chosen. But yeah, what Luke said about the colors is, really valid. And I'm finding that the proportions here seem a bit off. We've got a lot of white space, a bit too much. We have really large box and whiskers, but we're really tiny dots in comparison, right? Like that's a bit out of proportion.
Yeah. I also find I have a kind of love-hate relationship with Viz and tooltips as well. I think they are very useful, but I find that when they pop up all the time, so I'm on the right hand kind of distribution plot at the moment, and that the Viz and tooltip actually is blocking the whole chart out, so I can't see if I wanted to go and I'm trying to scroll down to see the next dot down from what I've hovered on, but actually I can't because the Viz and tooltip blocked the the chart. So I find that they're almost more effective when you use them in a chart that's less granular because you've got less chance of obscuring other data points. But
yeah,
kind of subjective, and it's only my.
I mean, they're responsive, but they're also not instant. At least, not. I mean, admittedly, I'm on my phone because I had Wi-Fi issues, but so I'm connected through my phone. But I've never used this in tooltips. I have zero intention of using it because it also means that if there's any really crucial information in there, I need to tell people to really please hover and not just look at the static image, but actually go to Tableau Public, interact, hover, so they can see all this important information. And I think I've rarely seen them in a way where I'm like, oh yeah, without this, the Viz would not be good. I would prefer to the Viz in tooltips, I think, looks much better than the rest of the Viz and is much more informative than the rest of the Viz. So I would prefer how many referees do we have? Oh, maybe like 50 or something. But I would probably prefer just a small multiples of all of the Viz's in tooltips, just, sorted for me to see all of them at once, but in a way that lets me compare things.
Yeah, I find with Viz and tooltips that I want them to be. Have you seen the movie Inception?
Yeah.
Where it's like the dreams within dreams type thing, and I want to hover over the Viz and tooltip and then see a tooltip on what I'm hovering on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I always find it kind of weird that doesn't happen, having used Tableau for a while, and that you're kind of expecting another tooltip to pop up, like particularly here because the bar chart's actually quite big.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't interact with the actual Viz in the tooltip, unfortunately.
Yeah. I've seen them used quite effectively in geographical circumstances, like maybe you've got a map with, a country level, but then you hover over a country and see a breakdown by state or something like that. They can look quite cool like that. But I don't know. I just think in this case, the Viz and tooltip is a little bit big and it prohibits you clicking around and exploring.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to Michael Dunphy. Really? Isn't that like from The Office? Well, it's Michael Scott, but isn't there some Dunphy thing then? No, Dunphy. I'm thinking of the Modern Family, Phil Dunphy. I'm getting them all mixed up because I actually. Oh, this is.
I don't watch that. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm subjected to The Office in this house. Unfortunately, I'm not a huge fan. Okay, I've tried to now fit this all into a single screen. It's quite a large Viz. Now, here we go. So fouls called by NBA referees. Top 10 referees by number of games. That's a good way to actually select them. How many games have they refereed? Yeah. And I'm guessing that's across the 4 seasons.
A lot of work's gone into this. He's got photos of all of the refs, and
they're all very consistent.
My one thing I wish you'd do, Michael, if you listen to this, is make it a little bit smaller because I've got a 32-inch screen here and I can't fit it on. I'm having to scroll around. It's absolutely huge. So I don't think it needs to be this big. But there's some great use of parameter or set actions here as well. There's a whole list of fouls at the bottom which you can click on and change which changes the whole Viz. And then you can also select. There's a button to select either playoff or regular season as well.
Yeah, I just clicked on that, and my suggestion here would be to remove the control button, so the exclude include, because people will accidentally click on it, and you don't want that. So, I love the transition that just happened. Now, again, we have box and whisker plot. There's an information button, and I'm struggling to read it now because I had to zoom out to 67% to just fit it on the screen. The number of total fouls called per game, represented by a white circle. You can hover over each box to learn more. Okay. Okay, so there's actually, really like helpful tooltips, which is good. The referee field doesn't seem to work.
It says referee sheet 1.
Yeah, so the name doesn't seem to come up. What's not I think it's a lot of work has gone to it, but it's a bit busy for me because the background image, while it looks good, I would probably cover with a transparent white so it just fades a bit more in the background, or just make it more transparent. I'm not it wasn't immediately clear to me that the bottom is all those file types that I can actually select to drive interaction. So if I click on shooting, something will happen. And I would have a guess that the image is part of why this takes a little longer to load, because
I'm not an enormous fan of background images.
Me neither.
If I'm honest.
I mean, sometimes they're really well done, but most of the time they kind of get in the way of understanding the viz, right? Like seeing stuff.
Yeah, I totally get why you want a certain aesthetic, or you want to theme the viz in a certain way, but this is particularly with the lights at the top. It's quite noisy. I'm not sure in this case whether it actually. I mean, you could have the NBA logo on a plain background in one of the corners to set the scene, so you know what you're looking at. I don't know. I'm not hugely bought into the idea of this particular background image. I really like the viz. I think it's some really good functionality, and Michael clearly knows Tableau pretty well, and he's done a really good job in terms of the viz, I think. And other things, I think, do you need 3 decimal places for the fouls per game? I think that's probably a bit excessive. But no, I mean, well done. He's clearly spent a lot of time and researched it, and spent time getting photos of the refs, and
okay. And Matthias, now his is very different from the ones we've seen. Oh, I just want to click on the link. Oh, where's the link? It's very simple. Oh, and I can zoom back in because it's not. I mean, it is also still quite massive. There's a lot of empty space on the outside, and I wonder if it's a bit too much empty space. Like it looks like there's something missing, maybe, or should there be something at the top and the bottom that I'm not seeing? I'm not sure what the rules are for ratio of covered space to empty space, but it's a bit much for my liking. The NBA word makes me think of the French flag. The only thing that makes me think basketball is the basketball in the bottom right corner. But keen to hear what your thoughts are on this.
I actually quite like it. I think it's kind of, in terms of its functionality, it's pretty basic and it's quite high level. So you can't investigate individual referees, but I think it's an interesting way to show it, and kind of marginal histogram type ideas around the squares. I think there's an argument to say that for the values in the squares, a bar chart might be, or definitely would be, an easier way of seeing the kind of differences in values and comparing them.
Yeah.
But I quite like it. I think it looks. I'm trying to think what it looks like. Almost like a bit of modern art or something like that. It's kind of cool.
It's really neat and simple. What I don't understand is the numbers at the top. So those vertical bars have the same numbers at the same as the first row. So I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't spot that. So it's duplicating information.
Yeah,
so you've got bars there, which is.
So if that comes from the different, it should be a different calculation. Should be the average of the two, because the other ones seem to have different numbers.
Well, the horizontal bars seem to be the values for 2019-20.
Yeah. So I think that needs an explanation of what is that number?
Definitely.
The other ones are clear.
I like the aesthetics. Yeah. I think as an image, it looks cool, but I think you need. It's kind of duplicating information, and I'm not sure the significance of including the horizontal bars for the latest year. And they're also right next to the squares for 16, 17, which
Mm.
I don't
Yeah,
really
it's
get.
a bit confusing.
But yeah, top marks for kind of design. I really like it, but I think it falls over a little bit in terms of what it's conveying with the data.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Then we have Natalia, okay, here we go. There's a link. So I did hear rumors that Microsoft want to have their Power BI people participate more, but I don't see any. So we'll just continue with our Tableau track here. Is this the wrong color? Should the purple be blue? Is it purple on your screen? Is it my eyes?
I think it's dark blue.
Okay, because it looks very purple to me. Let me quickly check. Pick the color. Why is it not getting? Here we go. Oh, I don't know what that color is, but anyway, it looks purple to me. NBA referees, fouls.
Yeah, I think. I don't know, I'd like to see. I'm not a fan of the white background of charts on coloured background dashboards. I think it almost looks a little bit clunky.
It looks stuck on, doesn't it?
And I'm really sorry, by the way, if there's loads of noise. We've got builders in our garden and they've started sawing paving stones in half.
Oh, nice.
She's also left some values in the tooltip. So we've got top along referee 1, which is obviously showing the rank on the left-hand side. So that could be cleaned up a little bit. And I don't think people wouldn't necessarily know what top along referee means.
Yeah. The title says NBA referees fouls, which makes it sound like the referees were the ones committing the foul. At least to me, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. I just need to let Mabel out. She's been by my feet and she wants to get out.
Okay. The dog. So to me, the color on the left still looks purple. That might be worth just to check, because if you look at the top, Tableau Public is really dark blue. Twitter is the blue here. This definitely looks like a bit of purple to me.
I just think this needs a little bit more explanation to it. We've got 2 lists of people, but you don't have any context whether the values are high or not. I mean, you assume they are, but if the referee's near the top, but I think it needs a bit more explanation and comparison to other things. Season by season maybe, or we've got season filters at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. I'd like to see it delved into a little bit more deeply.
Yeah, agree. Okay.
And better titles maybe too on the charts.
And then we have Jayasankar. And we have another tree map. I think we've talked probably enough about the tree map, but let's see what this one looks like and what the viz does. Okay, to make this smaller a bit so we can see it all.
Okay, so we've got the basketball chart, the top right. First of all, the chart choice shouldn't be a line chart because it's categorical data. So, typically we'd use a line chart where it's temporal data, or if there's a clear sequence of something happening, then you could use a line chart. But line charts imply chronology and connection. So, in this case, it's not the right chart type for what we're seeing. Plus, also the lines on the basketball court behind make it pretty difficult to see what's going on in the actual chart itself.
Yeah. I also wonder if the total fouls, like if there are delay technical and there's 0, why are they even included?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But I think Jayasankar, you need to ask yourself whether someone who has no knowledge of basketball will be able to understand this, because I don't think they will. And the chart at the bottom, the big table.
Can't even read it.
Some of the titles are, are truncated and squashed together, and text is wrapped, and it's tables. Tables are pretty much only good for one thing, and that's looking for specific values. Typically, you might have a crosstab with years and a category, something like that. So if you want to see what happens in a particular year for a particular category, it's very easy to get to that individual number. But what I'm seeing here is just a sea of numbers with headers that I can't really read, so I don't really know what they relate to.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just, here's an Excel spreadsheet, which isn't really giving us anything useful. I would suggest to have a think about, what is there in the data that you would like to focus on, rather than trying to visualize everything and then, just create something new that's like simple and focused, because based on this, like, no one would be able to understand anything really. Okay.
Yeah, we've also got a dashboard action on hover. So if you hover over the tree map, then that changes the chart, basketball court chart. So it's probably not the best for performance if you're doing that. So if you're filtering something based on your mouse hovering, the likelihood is that performance won't be as good. I definitely use a select action, way to kick off the action from the tree map if you're going to use that.
Yeah, and the axis changes all the time, so it's really hard to even kind of use it to compare.
Yeah, it's distracting. Every time I move my mouse, I'm seeing the lines move. So,
yeah.
Okay, but yeah, have a look at what other people have done, I think, this week, and try and practice some other chart types. And remember that don't use a line chart when you're not looking at time as a rule.
Yep, agreed. Okay, let's do Amanda's, and that's probably going to be getting us to the end of our time today. NBA's whistleblowers. Would you use the term whistleblowers for something that's not, like for actual refereeing, which is literally whistleblowing, rather than the concept of whistleblowing?
I don't know, it's a bit of a play on words, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, I guess the term as we know it came from somewhere. Maybe it did come from refereeing, or I don't know. But
yeah.
I don't mind that so much. I think
Okay. I wasn't sure how that would be perceived. Okay.
Bit of a pump. So
yeah.
I'm not sure about the font that she's used. It reminds me, I'm a big Pink Floyd fan, and if anyone's familiar with the Wall album by Pink Floyd, the typeface is very similar to that. I'm not sure how it relates to the NBA.
Yeah. Now you can, so this is basically for your game day strategy, which I think is a neat approach. Let's pick a few randoms, and I have no idea who these people are, so I'm just picking names that I kind of hover over. Okay, so I've picked Dan Crawford, Bill Kennedy, and Ed Malloy. And it looks at the games they've officiated versus the fouls per game, and it gives you a little bit of a summary, and that this is, I guess, you can strategize what they're going to potentially do. I think given the data set, this is probably, as useful as you can make it, because there will probably be, in the real world, other factors going into it, but you don't have all that data. But yeah, not quite sure.
I think what she's trying to do is imagine that this was like a whiteboard in the changing room or something, where they're looking at ways to approach a game. So that's pretty cool, actually. But yeah, it's
It is. Now I'm wondering, actually, because visually, you see these referees listed in certain points on the scatter plot, but where they are, I mean, what matters is not so much how many games they have been in, it's more the fouls per game, right? Like, that's the likelihood of them calling it. So I would maybe try to opt for a bar chart that makes it visually very immediately visible. This is the top foul that person has called, for example, or the number of fouls. Because I find with all this white space, I'm like, what is the meaning of the exact position? That's what I'm constantly asking myself. But it's not that important where that's at. Like the height is important, not the horizontal position.
Yeah, when you're normalizing the data with fouls per game, you almost don't need the game's officiated. Almost becomes a bit irrelevant.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, I'm gonna bring us back on camera right now. So it's a shame we couldn't see Mabel. It's a shame that she's made a departure. But
she's gone on. She's got important things to do.
Well,
I'm
and
sure
she
sleeping, running away from our builder.
Yeah, and she probably thought, well, I don't want to be too biased for favorite selection on Friday. So thank you everyone who's tuned in. I hope that was useful, and I hope that watching other people get feedback helps you, update your own viz. The usual applies. Send as you create something new, post a response to your original tweet with the new version, so we can see visually what the difference is, because just numbers wise, there's not the time for us to click on everyone's link. We will probably only ever look at the pictures. And it'll be nice to see what you all create, and then look at that on Friday, and we'll pick some favorites. We'll get the dogs to do favorites again, and hopefully Luke still has some swag left.
I've got loads of swag.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, good. And that brings us to the end of it. Luke, any final words?
No, I don't think so. It's been fun again.
Yeah, and good.
Yeah, I guess we'll get out the dog favourites later in the week.
Yeah.
I'll try and tidy up my office as well. I just realised I've got like 5 mugs on the desk behind me. So, anyway, but yeah, we'll do that maybe Friday or Saturday or something, and get the tweets and the videos out at some point over the weekend. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me again. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and